We know you've just been spending company money on training courses. My sister-in-law Tasha snapped at Thanksgiving dinner. You're terminated. I calmly handed her my badge. You have 15 minutes before your main job stops running. Tell your father-in-law I said good luck. The table went deathly quiet. My father-in-law, the man who built this company from the ground up, sat at the head of the table, chewing his turkey like it wasn't the last meal he was going to get in a long while. His eyes stayed fixed on his plate, refusing to meet mine. Not even a glance in my direction. I had spent years keeping his business running, keeping it alive. And now, I was the enemy. I didn't need to look around the table to know the others were avoiding my gaze. My brother, Dave, sat across from me, shoulders hunched, eyes wide. The CEO of the company, yet he couldn't bring himself to stand up for me. His wife was the one wearing the pants. It always had been. The smell of pine candles mingled with something more bitter in the air. A clash of the season's cheer and the pungent odor of passive aggression. I should have expected this. Thanksgiving dinner at their house was always a powder keg, with a thin veneer of polite conversation masking the tension that lived in every word. Tasha's voice was the worst, thin like a dental drill scraping against raw nerves. And she always knew how to make me feel small. It had been like that for years. I was just the computer girl, the one who fixed their messes, who kept their servers humming in the background while they played at being a family. I looked at Tasha, swirling her glass of Chardonnay with a smirk. Her eyes scanned the room like a predator sizing up its prey, her gaze flicking toward the board members who'd been invited to this little family gathering. They were the audience for her performance. Lots of line items for external technical training. She continued, her voice as sweet as honey. Seminars, certifications, that sort of thing. I stabbed at my dry turkey with my fork, trying not to let my frustration show. It was hard to care about anything when the meat was so dry it could have been used as insulation. I didn't look up. Technology changes, Tasha. You have to keep up or the system rots, like changing the oil in a car. If you don't do it, the engine seizes. She didn't take kindly to being reminded that she had no idea what she was talking about. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But usually, you change the oil on the car you actually drive, not a phantom vehicle, she said, leaning forward just a little too much. Her perfume hit me like a punch. Expensive and floral, with the faintest undertone of something else, something dead and buried. I swallowed, the knot in my throat tightening. Is that so? I muttered. My water tasted bitter in my mouth, and for a second I wished it were something stronger, something that could numb the ache in my chest. The quiet was unbearable, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The seconds passed like hours. I put my fork down, the metal clinking against the china, sharp and final, like the gavel in a courtroom. What are you implying, Tasha? I asked, looking her dead in the eye. Her smile widened, but I could see the crack in it. I'm not implying anything, sweetie, she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. I'm stating. We audited the receipts. You've spent $40,000 this year on courses that have no syllabus, no accreditation, and seem to be hosted on servers that don't officially exist. I felt a cold chill wash over me. Not fear. Fear is hot, it's prickly, it burns. This was something colder, more calculating, like a surgeon realizing the patient was dead long before the incision was made. A calm, icy certainty. I repeated, tasting the word on my tongue. It felt like ash. Is that the official stance of the board? I asked, barely above a whisper. Tasha's smile was all sharp edges. The official stance, she said, pulling out a folded envelope from her purse, is that you're terminated, effective immediately for cause embezzlement and gross misconduct. She slid the envelope across the table, letting it glide over the lace tablecloth like it was nothing more than a piece of paper. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what it said. It was corporate boilerplate, drafted by a lawyer who probably didn't even know what a server rack looked like. You think I'm stealing, I said flatly. The numbers don't lie, she said, shrugging as she tossed the accusation at me like it was just another empty word. Where's Dave in all of this? I looked at my brother, but his gaze was fixed firmly on his lap. He didn't say a word. Not a single word. Dave, I said, keeping my voice low, "Are you just gonna sit there and let her do this?" His shoulders tensed, but still, he didn't speak. He didn't have the guts to stand up for me. It wasn't just Tasha. It was them all. Every one of them. The ones who had turned their backs on me long ago. "Hand over your badge and your laptop," Tasha said, her voice now all business. "Security is already remotely wiping your access." I looked at my phone. Sure enough, a notification popped up: system access revoked. They were thorough. Too thorough. But they had no idea what was coming. I stood up, feeling the stiffness in my knees. I was 45, and I'd spent too many years hunched over keyboards, too many hours sitting in cheap office chairs. I felt like a rusty hinge finally being forced open. "You know," I said, my voice low and raspy, "I always told Dad that the architecture of this company was fragile. It needed constant specialized care, like a premature baby or a nuclear reactor. You have to maintain it or it all falls apart." "Save the drama," Tasha waved a hand dismissively. "We've got an outsourced IT firm taking over on Monday. They're half the price and twice the speed." Monday. I laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound that barely felt like laughter at all. "That's cute." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key card. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a wet plop in the cranberry sauce. "You're firing the mechanic while the car is doing 80 on the highway, Tasha," I said. "And you didn't just fire the mechanic, you fired the engine." Her smile faltered for a split second. "Well, be fine," she scoffed. "Go enjoy your retirement. Maybe take a knitting class." I leaned in close, my hands flat on the table. I could see the pores in her foundation. "You have 50 minutes, I whispered. "50 minutes until what?" she asked, rolling her eyes. "Until your main job stops running," I said, standing up and grabbing my purse. "Until the ghost in the machine realizes its master is gone." I didn't say goodbye to Dave. I didn't look at my father-in-law. I just walked out the front door into the crisp November air, the sound of my footsteps muffled by the weight of everything unsaid. I was free. And they were about to realize what that really meant. I didn't hear the door close behind me, but I felt the weight of it. The click of it was final. I stood there, alone on the front steps, the cold air biting at my skin. It felt like the world had just shifted a few inches, tilting on its axis. I took a deep breath, the kind of breath you take when you've just been tossed from a high place and your lungs haven't quite caught up to the fall. The house behind me looked warm, inviting, like something you'd see in a Norman Rockwell painting. It was the kind of place where families gather, where smiles are plastered on faces as the turkey is carved and the mashed potatoes are passed around. But tonight, all I could see was a cage, a trap that had been set for me, and I had just walked right into it. I turned and walked toward my truck, the gravel crunching under my boots, the familiar sound oddly comforting. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. What was left for me there? A family that couldn't see me for anything more than a cog in their corporate machine. A brother who couldn't even defend me when his wife tried to destroy me. No, it was over. The truck started on the first turn of the key, the engine rumbling to life. I didn't drive right away. Instead, I sat there for a moment, letting the sound of the engine fill the silence. It was the only thing that felt real right now. A truck that ran like a dream, even if it looked like it had more rust than paint. It was mine, and it worked. I pulled out of the driveway slowly, my headlights cutting through the darkness. The road stretched out in front of me, empty and cold. There was a clarity to the stillness. I knew what had just happened. I had just been fired, but I had been fired for something I didn't do. I had been made a scapegoat, cast aside so they could maintain their illusion of control, and Tasha, she had made sure of it. I could feel the sting of betrayal even now, as my tires hummed over the asphalt. I'd spent the last 20 years of my life building that company. I had kept their servers from crashing, patched up their digital infrastructure, and made sure they never had to worry about anything technical. Every time a system went down, I was the one who picked up the pieces. Every time they needed something fixed, I was the one who did it. And now, in one single moment, they had tossed me aside, like I was nothing. I could still feel Tasha's eyes on me as I walked out, cold, calculating. She didn't care. She never had. To her, I was just the one who kept the lights on, but she was the one who got to wear the crown. She didn't understand what it took to make the company run. She didn't know the first thing about the architecture of it. But that was the way it always worked. People like her always took credit for what they didn't build. I reached for my phone and unlocked it, my hands moving mechanically. I was going to make sure I didn't just fade into the background. I wasn't going to be forgotten, not like this. I opened up the files I'd saved, the ones I'd kept hidden for just such a moment. The training courses Tasha had mocked. They weren't courses at all. They were server leases, backups, redundant systems I had built to keep the company from collapsing when the main infrastructure inevitably failed. It wasn't just that they didn't appreciate me, they had no idea how fragile everything was. Without me, without my systems, that company wouldn't last a month. Hell, I had made sure it would last until today. I knew exactly what they needed to keep running. And I knew exactly what would happen when they didn't get it. I pulled up the protocol on my phone, the one that would trigger a system-wide shutdown if I didn't authenticate. I had set it up years ago, when the company had nearly been taken down by a ransomware attack. I was the one who'd saved them, who'd made sure that their precious data was secure. But tonight I wasn't going to save them. Tonight, I was going to make them feel exactly what it was like to be helpless. I hit the button. The countdown began. 15 minutes. I had just been fired, but I had already set the wheels in motion. They were going to need me, and by the time they realized it, it would be too late. The road ahead was dark, but I could see what was coming. The minutes were ticking down, and soon the system would be locked. The data would stop flowing. The trucks would stop moving. The warehouses would grind to a halt. The empire they thought they had would collapse under its own weight. I wasn't just walking away. I was watching it all burn down from a distance, knowing that it had all been inevitable. The moment they pulled the plug on me, they had signed their own death sentence. I drove on, my hands steady on the wheel, as the minutes ticked away. The first domino had fallen, and I was the one who pushed it. I drove for what felt like hours, but the landscape didn't change much. The road was endless, stretched out in front of me like an open wound. The same stretch of highway, the same broken signs and empty fields. My truck rumbled along, the engine steady, but my mind was anything but calm. I had set things in motion. The question now was, how far was I willing to let them go? It was cold. November air. I rolled down the window, the rush of frigid air biting at my skin. It didn't feel like freedom, not yet. It felt like a countdown. Like something was ticking away in the back of my head, reminding me that I wasn't just driving away from a family dinner gone wrong. I was driving away from a life, from a career I had built from the ground up, only to have it ripped away by a woman who didn't even know how to change a server's password without breaking it. I glanced at my phone. The screen was filled with notifications, but I ignored them. I didn't need to look. It was only a matter of time before they started calling. They would, of course. They always did when something went wrong. But tonight, it wasn't going to be them telling me what to do. It wasn't going to be Tasha waving her little corporate directives in front of me like she had all the power. She didn't. I knew the system was already beginning to fail. That was the beauty of it. The dead man's switch I had built years ago was doing its job. Every hour I didn't authenticate the system, it would start to shut down, and if I didn't check in within a set time frame, the whole thing would lock down tight. A digital fortress. I had set it up back when they almost lost everything to a ransomware attack. I had told them the system needed constant care, constant oversight. But they never listened. They didn't care. Not until they needed me. And now, they'd see just how much they had taken me for granted. The road ahead was empty, just the flickering of headlights cutting through the night. I reached for my phone again, but this time I didn't skip the notifications. There were a lot of them. Alert server authentication failed. I'll alert secondary node unresponsive. Fashion alert admin override required. The messages were popping up faster now. As the system began to panic, I felt a strange, detached sense of satisfaction. This was what they deserved. This was what Tasha had earned, what she had been asking for. She had thought she could push me aside, make me the scapegoat, blame everything on me while she strutted around pretending she understood what she was doing. The truth was, I had saved her ass more times than she knew. More times than any of them knew. When their little tech company nearly fell apart, it was me who fixed it. I was the one who made sure everything stayed afloat while they played at being corporate big shots. And now it was all unraveling. I couldn't help but laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing I could do. It was either laugh or scream. Laughing was easier. The highway blurred around me. The only thing grounding me was the steady rumble of the truck. I took a turn onto a quieter road, one that led toward the outskirts of town. There were no cars here, no lights, nothing to distract me from the storm I knew was brewing behind me. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. Tasha would be on the phone with her outsourced IT firm soon, trying to figure out how to fix it. But they wouldn't be able to. Not without me. Not without my key. I had built the system with layers of security, backups on top of backups. The data they thought they could control was now just a shadow, locked away where no one could reach it. The fail-safes I had designed were foolproof. When Tasha fired me, she had no idea what she was triggering. She thought she was cutting the dead weight. She had no idea that I was the one holding the foundation together. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold air through the window. It didn't help. Nothing helped. The truth was I was angry. And I was hurt. But I had a job to do. And that job wasn't just about revenge, it was about showing them exactly how much they depended on me. The clock was ticking, and every minute that passed was one more step toward the inevitable. They wouldn't be able to fix it. Not without me. I pulled into a small gas station off the main road, just a place to get some gas and take a moment to think. The lights overhead buzzed, flickering in the cold wind that pushed through the cracked door. It wasn't much, but it was a brief reprieve. I grabbed a drink from the cooler and sat down at one of the old metal tables by the window, the smell of stale coffee and gasoline mixing in the air. The steady hum of the refrigerator in the corner was the only sound, the only thing to remind me that I was still alive, still moving forward. As I sipped the drink, I pulled up the company dashboard on my phone again. The map that once glowed with bright green dots representing active shipments was now nothing but red. It was chaos and alert data loss detected, alert critical failure in operations. And I could feel the tension in my chest, but it wasn't panic. It was a strange, calm detachment. The kind you get when you know there's no turning back, when you know you've done everything you can, and now it's time to sit back and watch the world burn. I wasn't going to save them this time. I wasn't going to fix it. They'd have to deal with the mess they made, and it was their mess, not mine. The phone buzzed in my hand again. More alerts, more failure, more panic. It was all happening, just like I knew it would. I wasn't looking at the clock anymore. I didn't need to. I could feel the seconds ticking down, the inevitable ending rushing toward me. It was only a matter of time before they realized what I had done. And then they'd come crawling. But by then, I'd be gone, gone from their grasp, gone from their control, and they'd finally understand. The minutes dragged by, each one slower than the last. I kept my hands on the wheel, focused on the road, but inside, everything felt like it was moving too fast. My phone was buzzing again, the screen flashing with more alerts from the company system. I had stopped looking at them. It was only a matter of time before they started calling me, begging for help, but I wasn't going to answer. Not now. The truck rumbled down the highway, the tires humming against the pavement. The steady noise was grounding, a kind of rhythm that helped me keep my thoughts in line. I wasn't going to think about what had just happened. I wasn't going to think about the dinner, the betrayal, or how Tasha had smiled at me like she'd just won some prize. What I needed was to focus. Focus on what was happening, what I had set in motion. It was too late for second thoughts now. My phone buzzed again, louder this time. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from Dave. Cynthia, please. Call me. Dad's freaking out. Tasha's flipping out. The system is down. What the hell did you do? I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off the phone, slipped it into the glove compartment, and locked it away. Let them deal with it. They were the ones who had pushed me to the edge. Tasha was the one who had underestimated me. Now she was going to see exactly what happens when you try to cut someone out of the equation. I couldn't stop the grin that tugged at the corner of my mouth. I wasn't doing this just for me. I was doing it for everyone who had ever been overlooked, ignored, undervalued. I had spent years building their empire, keeping the lights on when they didn't even understand how close they had come to losing everything. And now, it was all coming apart, and they had no idea how to fix it. I had given them plenty of warning. Hell, I had practically begged them to let me modernize the system, to invest in disaster recovery, but they hadn't listened. Tasha had refused, calling it negative thinking. She'd wanted to focus on growth, not on securing their future. She didn't understand the technology, never had, and she certainly didn't understand the architecture that held everything together. That was my job. That was my world. But they didn't want me anymore. Now, they were going to pay for it. I took a sharp turn, the tires squealing a little as the truck slid on the wet road. The weather had taken a turn. It was cold and damp, the kind of cold that gets into your bones. The first drops of rain started to splatter against the windshield, leaving streaks that blurred the streetlights ahead. The world outside was starting to feel as fragmented as my thoughts. I thought about the system. I thought about the way Tasha had fired me with no remorse, how she had acted like I was just some cog in the machine, but I wasn't a cog. I was the architect. And now she was about to realize just how fragile everything was. I could almost see it in my mind's eye, how the company would begin to unravel, the trucks that couldn't get their routes, the inventory systems that would fail, the drivers stuck at loading docks, not knowing what to do, the executives in their high-rise offices scrambling to put out the fires, and Tasha, sitting at the top of it all, pretending to be in control. But slowly realizing that she was powerless, I couldn't help but feel a little satisfaction. It wasn't enough to just watch them fail. No, I wanted to make sure they understood. I wanted them to know exactly who had taken everything down, who had pulled the plug. It wasn't just me walking out of that dinner, it was me taking everything they had built and watching it fall apart. The minutes continued to tick by, and with each passing second, the panic at the office would be growing. I could almost hear the calls to the IT consultants, the scrambling to figure out what had gone wrong. But they wouldn't be able to fix it. Not without me. The system was locked down tight, and Tasha's fancy new outsourced IT firm wouldn't have a clue how to break through. They wouldn't even know where to start. I reached for my phone, just to see if I had missed anything important. The screen lit up with more notifications, but this time there was something different. Alerter system lockdown initiated. Critical failure detected. I leaned back in my seat and exhaled slowly. That was it. They were officially in the dark now. They couldn't access the system, couldn't fix the problem. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. I knew what was coming, and they didn't. Another buzz. Another message from Dave. Text Cynthia, please. What's happening? We need you. The system's gone. We're dead in the water. I didn't bother responding. I didn't need to. They didn't need me. They had made sure of that. I wasn't going to save them this time. Not after everything. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It had only been 15 minutes since I walked out that door. 15 minutes, and everything was falling apart. I didn't know if it was the rain or the adrenaline, but something inside me was finally starting to feel alive again. The phone buzzed one more time. This time, it was a call from Tasha. I didn't even look at it. I turned the phone off completely. I wasn't her problem anymore, and I wasn't going back. The road ahead stretched out in front of me, dark and empty, but there was no turning back now. Everything I had built, everything I had done was about to be tested. I had done my part. Now, it was their turn to pick up the pieces. The night stretched on, but the silence around me felt different now. The rain was coming down harder, a steady tap against the roof of my truck, each drop a reminder that I had crossed a line. There was no turning back. The family I had built the company for, the one I had sacrificed everything for, was unraveling before my eyes. And I wasn't sorry. I hadn't even bothered to check my phone after I turned it off. The notifications were endless, each one more desperate than the last. And Cynthia, please, what the hell did you do? I could practically hear Dave's voice in my head, his panic bleeding through the text. The thing was, I didn't care. They didn't deserve my help. Not after what they did. The road was empty, just the endless stretch of asphalt cutting through the night, illuminated by my headlights and the occasional flicker of a streetlight. The world outside seemed muffled, like I was moving through a tunnel, where the only sound was the low hum of the truck's engine and the steady rhythm of rain hitting the windshield. I'd been prepared for this, for the quiet after the storm. The thing that had been gnawing at me for years was finally fading away, like a bad dream. But even as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening. This wasn't just about getting fired. This wasn't even about the money. It was about all the years of giving and never getting anything in return. Tasha had thrown me out like I was disposable. She thought she could play CEO without understanding the very thing that kept her company running. I took a deep breath and glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It had been nearly an hour since I left. The countdown in my head ticked forward, each minute pulling them closer to their reckoning. I could already imagine what was happening back at the office. The consultants would be on the phone, desperately trying to figure out how to fix the problem. But they wouldn't. Not without the key. I had been the one who kept things running. Every time a server crashed, every time there was an issue with logistics, I was the one who stayed late, fixed it, and kept the trains running on time. No one ever appreciated it. Tasha certainly hadn't. She never understood the work, the care, the countless hours I had spent behind the scenes, keeping the system stable. But tonight, she was about to learn the hard way. The system had been my creation, and now it was going to come crashing down without me. The truck turned off the main highway and onto a side road that led into a quiet town. I was tired. I hadn't slept much the past few nights, too busy worrying about the fallout from the family dinner, too busy trying to figure out how I was going to handle being fired without losing my mind. But now, as I drove further into the night, the exhaustion began to creep up on me. The emotional toll of everything, the years of working for a family that saw me as nothing more than a tool, was starting to weigh heavy on my chest. I parked the truck in front of a small motel, the neon sign buzzing faintly in the rain-soaked night. It looked as empty as I felt inside. The kind of place where you check in under a fake name and no one asks questions. I could feel the tension leave my shoulders as I got out of the truck and walked inside. The smell of stale coffee and cleaning products hit me as soon as I stepped through the door. The clerk, a young guy with a neck tattoo and a bored expression, handed me a key card without asking for identification. The room was small, but it was clean enough. The kind of place where you could disappear for a night, where you could forget the world for a little while. I threw my bag on the bed and sat down, pulling off my boots and stretching my legs out. I didn't want to think about the company. I didn't want to think about Tasha or Dave or the board members who had never once recognized the work I did. But I couldn't stop my mind from going there. It was like a loop I couldn't escape. I took a deep breath and reached for my phone. I had turned it off earlier, but now I needed to know. What was happening at the company? What had they done in my absence? I unlocked the phone, almost afraid to look, but there was no avoiding it. Alert, system failure detected. Add alert, admin authentication failed. An alert, critical data lost. I scrolled through more alerts, the messages more frantic now. One of the warehouse managers had called in, trying to get the system back online. Another alert popped up: attempted admin login detected. IP address blocked. I couldn't help it. I smiled. They had no idea. The data wasn't just down, it was locked. They couldn't access anything. The entire system was sealed, and Tasha's outsourced IT team couldn't do a damn thing about it. Every attempt to log in would be blocked. They couldn't even get to the backup servers because the protocols I had set up had cut them off. It wasn't just a fail-safe. It was a time bomb. I tossed the phone on the bed and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The rain outside had picked up again, the sound of it against the window soft and rhythmic. I closed my eyes, trying to push the noise from my head, but no matter how much I tried to ignore it, a part of me couldn't help but feel something else. Something I hadn't expected. Guilt. Guilt for walking away. For leaving behind the company that I had spent my whole life building. For leaving behind my family. But then I reminded myself, they had made me feel small. They had treated me like a tool. And tonight they would feel what it was like to be powerless. Tonight they were going to experience what it was like to be left behind. I picked up my phone again. There was another message, this time from Tasha. And Cynthia, what did you do? We're falling apart here. The system won't come back online. You have to help us. I didn't respond. I just locked the phone and turned it off again. I had done enough. The rest was up to them, and somehow I knew Tasha wasn't going to get her happy ending. Not this time. The quiet of the motel room was suffocating, the only sound the gentle hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old building. I stared at the dark ceiling, the soft glow of the streetlight outside casting long shadows across the room. It felt surreal, sitting here, knowing that back at the office, chaos was unfolding. But it wasn't my chaos anymore. I had done my part. The rest was up to them. I checked my phone again. More missed calls, more texts. This time, one from my father-in-law to Cynthia, please come back. We need you. The system is completely down. Tasha is beside herself. Can you help us? I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. I could almost hear his voice, desperate, tired, probably still in shock over what had just happened. He didn't get it. None of them did. I deleted the message without replying. I could feel the weight of everything pressing on my chest, but there was no turning back now. I had already walked away from them. I wasn't going to fix their mess. I wasn't going to play the hero again. Not when they had done everything they could to shut me out, to replace me with someone who didn't know the first thing about the systems that kept the company running. I leaned back against the headboard, my mind replaying the scene from dinner. Tasha's smug face, her eyes flashing with triumph as she handed me my termination notice. The way my father-in-law had looked at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. It stung more than the accusations, more than the firing. It was the betrayal. The way they all just let her do it. I could have fought back. I could have stayed, tried to convince them that I was still valuable, that the company wouldn't last without me. But I knew better. They didn't want to hear it. Not from me. Not after everything I had done for them. They didn't see me anymore. I was just the computer girl to them, someone they could easily replace when it became inconvenient. But now, they were seeing just how hard it was to replace me. I picked up my phone again, glancing at the latest message. Text Cynthia, please. What did you do? The system's gone dark. Tasha's freaking out. The trucks are down. The drivers can't get their routes. I felt a twinge of something in my chest. Was it guilt? No, it couldn't be. It wasn't guilt that had pushed me to this point. It was the years of being overlooked, of doing all the work while they took all the credit. It was the fact that they had fired me without a second thought, without even considering how much of the company's success had been built on my shoulders. Tasha was panicking, and she deserved it. She was the one who had pushed me out, who had insisted I was obsolete. But she didn't understand. She didn't get the delicate balance it took to keep that company's digital infrastructure intact. Without me, it was all going to fall apart. And now, she was seeing the truth. I chuckled bitterly to myself. I wasn't going back to fix it. They had made their bed. Now, they were going to lie in it. But it wasn't just about the company. It wasn't just about watching it burn. No, this was personal. This was about showing Tasha and the rest of them that they couldn't just discard me and walk away. That they needed me. I glanced out the window at the empty parking lot, the rain pouring down in sheets, turning the pavement into a shimmering pool of water. The world outside seemed distant, like I wasn't really part of it anymore. I stood up and walked over to the small table by the window, running my fingers over the edge of it. The room was small, dingy, but it felt right. It felt like the beginning of something new. I had walked away from that dinner, from that life, but now I was free, and that freedom tasted better than I ever could have imagined. I pulled open the drawer of the small desk and found the piece of paper I had stashed there. It was a copy of the contract I had drawn up earlier, the one I had set aside for just this moment. I opened it up, scanning the terms again. The price was steep, but it was nothing compared to what they were going to lose if they couldn't get the data back. The backup systems I had set up over the years weren't just any backup. They were cold storage, secure vaults buried deep in the cloud, where Tasha and the board would never think to look. And those backups, they weren't free. I had made sure they were expensive. I had always known that the day would come when they would need me, and I had made sure I would be in control when it happened. I had given them a chance to appreciate me. I had begged them to invest in the infrastructure. But they had refused. They had laughed it off, called it excessive. Now, it was all coming crashing down. And I wasn't going to be the one to stop it. I reached for my phone again and typed out the message. See, Tasha, I hope you're enjoying the chaos. The data won't be coming back unless I say so. If you want it, there's a price, a very high one. Sai sent it without hesitation. I leaned back against the chair, the soft creak of the upholstery the only sound in the room. I wasn't done. Not yet. This was just the beginning. I smiled to myself. The world was about to see what happens when you underestimate someone who knows exactly how to play the game. I hadn't even finished my coffee when the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Stan. He was one of the few who still knew what the hell was going on at the company. He had been there with me through the late nights, the last-minute fixes, and the quiet moments when I had to cover for everyone else. He was one of the few people who actually understood how the company ran. I picked up without hesitation. "Stan," I said, my voice steady but tired. "Cynthia," he replied, his voice low. "It's a shit show over here. The whole damn thing's collapsing. Drivers can't get their routes. The warehouse is completely blind, and half the fleet's sitting idle." I took a long drag of my coffee, the bitter taste still lingering in my mouth. "Sounds about right. How's Tasha handling it?" "Panic. Total panic. She's trying to put on a show for the board, but they can't even get into the system. They're calling in every tech person they know, but it's no good. Hell, they don't even know what they're looking for. It's like trying to fix a car without knowing how to pop the hood." I chuckled despite myself. Yeah, well, she wanted control. Now she's got it. Too bad it's all slipping through her fingers. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Stan spoke again. "You're not planning on coming back, are you?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a sip of the coffee, feeling the warmth spread through me. It was still dark outside, the rain still coming down in sheets, and the world felt so far away from everything I had just left behind. Stan, I'm not going back. Not for Tasha, not for anyone. They wanted to push me out, fine. But I'm not saving their asses anymore." "You're sure about this?" he asked. Like he wasn't just talking about the company but about me, about the choice I had just made. "I'm sure," I said, my voice colder than I wanted it to sound. "I've been covering for them for years. They don't appreciate it. They never did." Stan sighed on the other end of the phone. "I did it. I do. But some of us are still here. We don't want to see it all go down the drain. We just need you to come back for a few days, fix what's broken." I paused, the thought of walking back into that mess tugging at me. I could almost feel the walls closing in, the weight of it all bearing down on me. But then I remembered Tasha's face, that smug look she had when she told me I was obsolete. No, I wasn't going back. I'm not going back. Stan, I said again, firmer this time. I've done enough. You've done enough. They can figure it out on their own. There was a long silence. Then Stan spoke again, softer this time. I know you. You don't just walk away from things like this. You built this place. It's part of you. You know that, right? I leaned back in the chair, staring out the window at the rain. Yeah, I built it. But it's not mine anymore, Stan. They made sure of that. He didn't respond at first, and I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, he spoke again. All right, but if you change your mind, if you want to fix things, just let me know. I'll be here. Thanks, Stan, I said, my voice softer now. But it's done. I hung up the phone and sat there for a few moments, the silence of the room enveloping me. It was strange, being in a place like this. The world outside felt far away, like a different life, and the weight of everything I had just walked away from was starting to sink in. But I didn't feel regret. Not yet. Maybe later, maybe when everything had calmed down, but not now. I pulled up my laptop, staring at the dim screen. I wasn't ready to move on yet, not until I saw the fallout, not until I watched Tasha and her little empire crumble. I opened the company's dashboard once more, knowing what I'd see. The alerts had only escalated. The trucks were down, the drivers were panicking, and the data was still locked away, buried in the cloud. The consultants they had hired were stumbling around, trying to figure out what the hell had happened, but they were clueless. Ada knocker system failure. Etchy, alert admin access denied. Alert data breach detected. I smiled to myself. They hadn't even begun to realize the full extent of the damage. It wasn't just the data, it was the core of the company. The heart, and they didn't have the key to fix it. Another notification popped up: security breach reported, external IP attempted access. And I leaned forward, glancing at the time. It was almost 5 in the morning. I knew it wouldn't be long before they realized how deep they were in it. Before they understood that the system wasn't just broken, it was dead. The data wasn't coming back unless I gave it to them. And I hadn't made it easy. They would have to crawl through broken glass to get to it. And they would eventually, but not without paying for it. I opened a new message to Dave. He had been begging me to come back, and I knew it would kill him to get the answer he deserved. Dave, you wanted me gone. I'm gone. The system's not coming back unless you pay the price. You know where to send the check. I hit send, watching the words sit on the screen for a moment before disappearing into the ether. The ball was in their court now. And when they came crawling back, I'd make sure they knew exactly how much they needed me. I sat back, staring out the window as the rain started to slow. It felt like a cleansing, like I was walking away from something old and beginning something new. And Tasha, well, she had just learned what happens when you mess with the wrong person. I wasn't done yet. The sun was beginning to rise, casting pale light through the cheap blinds of the motel room. It wasn't much of a view, just the empty parking lot, a couple of trucks huddled under the awning, their drivers asleep inside. But it felt like freedom, the kind of freedom you get when everything you've built is no longer your burden to carry, when the weight of responsibility isn't pressing down on you every second of the day. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone. The screen lit up again with notifications, but I ignored them. I had been ignoring them for days now. The last message I sent had been to Dave. The system's not coming back unless you pay the price. I had no intention of going back, no intention of fixing their mess. They had made their bed, and now they were going to have to lie in it. But part of me, the part that had spent years trying to make them understand, felt the weight of the decision I had made. I wasn't the villain in this story. No, I was the one who had been wronged. I had been the one holding everything together, quietly working in the background, making sure they didn't fall apart. And when I had asked for recognition, for a little respect, they had thrown me out without a second thought. They had tossed me aside like I was nothing. I hadn't even been surprised. The betrayal had been coming for a long time, hidden in plain sight. It had been in the way Tasha had slowly but surely taken over everything, the way she had inserted herself into conversations that were never meant for her, the way she had always thought she knew better than anyone else. It was all a game to her, and I had been the pawn. But now, I wasn't the pawn. I was the one holding the key. I heard my phone buzz again, this time a call from Stan. I knew what he wanted. They were desperate. They were trying to fix things, trying to salvage what was left of the company. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I wasn't going to throw them a lifeline. I answered the phone, but I didn't speak at first. I just listened to the sounds on the other end. The hum of machines, the chaos in the background. It was almost like hearing the heartbeat of a company that had run out of time. Cynthia. Stan's voice finally broke through. We're in deep, you know? The system's still locked down. We can't get into the backups and everything's falling apart. Tasha's about to lose it. The drivers are stuck at the docks. The whole thing's a disaster. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. I told you this would happen, I said, my voice colder than I intended. I warned all of you, but you didn't want to listen. Now it's too late. We need you, Stan said, desperation creeping into his voice. Cynthia, you're the only one who can fix this. Please, you can't just leave us hanging like this. I stood up, pacing the small room, the thin carpet crunching underfoot. I left because I was tired of being treated like I didn't matter. I'm done saving everyone else. It's not my problem anymore. Cynthia, please? He begged, his voice a low rumble of helplessness. If we don't get that system back online, we're done. The board's talking about liquidation. They want to sell off everything. We're finished. The words hit me harder than I expected. Liquidation. I had never imagined it would come to this. Not after everything I had put into it, not after all the late nights and the countless hours of work. I had built that company. But now, standing at the crossroads, I knew the choice was mine. I know, I said, my voice softer now. But this time, it's not my responsibility to fix it. It's not my job anymore. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I could hear the sound of Stan's breathing. I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. All right, he finally said, his tone resigned. I get it. You've made your choice. But just know it's not over yet. Tasha won't let this go. Let her try, I said, a cold edge to my voice. I'm not going back. You're all on your own now. I hung up, the finality of it settling in. The decision was made. There was no going back. They would have to face the consequences of their own arrogance. And I would be watching from a distance, no longer the fixer, but the one who walked away. I took a deep breath and glanced around the room. The smell of stale coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the faint scent of rain. The world outside was still dark, but the first hints of daylight were creeping in. I had time. I wasn't in a rush. I pulled out the contract I had drafted days before, when I knew I was preparing for the moment when they would need me again. I hadn't expected it to be so soon, but here we were. I opened the document and checked the terms. The price was steep, but it was nothing compared to what they were going to lose if they didn't pay. I wasn't in the business of charity. I had learned that the hard way. I sent the contract to Dave. You want the data back. There's a price. I'll send you the decryption key once the payment clears. You have 48 hours before the backup storage is wiped. I hit send, then leaned back in my chair. I could feel the tension in my chest, but it wasn't the same kind of tension as before. This was different. This was control. I was done being the one to pick up the pieces. Now, I was the one who decided if the pieces would even fit back together. I wasn't just walking away from the company. I was walking away from a lifetime of being taken for granted. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the calm wash over me. When I opened them, the phone buzzed again. I didn't answer. Not yet. The ball was in their court, and this time, they were the ones who had to play the game.